I'm Adam House and I'm a fraud. Thank you so much for joining us for episode 2 of this first series of Fraud, which is a podcast where I get to invite on people that I think are doing inspiring things in the world of development and cultural build and ask them if they've ever felt like a fraud, because it doesn't look like they ever would have from outside. Today I am joined by Alicia Grimes. Now, Alicia Grimes, along with Natalie Pearce, started a cultural design company called the Future Kind Collective. And when I was first coming up with people I wanted to come on this podcast, I started by thinking, should I make it all just about people in the people development field? But I think there's such a kinship between people development and people culture, creating spaces where people feel worthy, feel supported, feel like they're able to develop, that it just made sense to invite some of the people that I think are doing amazing things in that space onto the podcast as well. And Alicia's right up there at the top of the list of people that I wanted to get on and talk to. And it does not disappoint. So much self-reflection going on in this episode, and I'll talk more about that in the outro at the end. But for now, welcome Alicia Grimes. Alicia, are you a fraud?
No, I'm not, but I may have felt like one in the past.
Okay, coming in there. I always like it when people come in with the no, I'm not, because I mean, it feels really confident, really confident. But as you say, you have felt like one in the past. I know that we're going to potentially talk about your company, the Future Kind Collective, as we go through this. And that was one of the many reasons I wanted you on this podcast, is because looking at what you're doing there looks really fantastic, but it also looks really confident, like you know what you're doing. And I'd love to know how you've kind of got there, especially if you have had these fraudulent feelings in the past. So I don't know how far back to go. Are we talking school? Are we talking uni? Are we talking stepping into work? Where is it that you first remember feeling fraudulent in some way, I guess?
It's a really great question. And I think when I reflect on this, there are definitely moments in each of those different areas, from when,
Yeah.
you're at school, when you sort of start out your career. I think where it's been most prominent and is most at the front of my mind is in my career. So over the last sort of 10 to 15 years, I think there have been significant moments where the word fraud has come up in my mind. It's either been fraud, imposter, that sort of thing. And I'll talk a bit in a minute about why I have quite a problem with those definitions and with
Yeah.
those words, particularly identifying as sort of my problem, as I'm the fraud, and why I'm feeling that. But I think when I think about where that's come up the most, it has probably been most prevalent in my career. And I think it's been down to the fact that, there's lots of reasons for why you can feel that way. But I think it's kind of in the environment when I remember the early days of my career and walking into offices or rooms or boardrooms or meetings and sort of thinking, what the hell am I doing here? And when is someone going to find me out? Now, fast forward to now, and I would say that those thoughts that come up, like not as much at all, like hardly at all. But that
Yeah.
has been a journey, and that has me being making sure I'm putting those mechanisms in place to remind myself of what is this thing I'm feeling and what actually is the reasons behind this. Because
Right.
often it's the environmental or societal reasons that are outside of my control or around me that might cause me to feel this way in these particular environments. And I think that's why it's a journey. I'm
Yeah.
not saying that it's something that I don't ever reflect on, but I think I have a different terminology for it now and a different way of framing what I used to think was me potentially being a fraud or an imposter.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting, and I want to dive into that a bit more about what were the light bulb moments along the way. I always remember, so I felt like a fraud before I got into the world of development, and then I felt like I tricked my way into development, and then felt fraudulent because of that. And then during my experiences over the years of feedback and getting different opportunities and people saying different things and coming to you with different things, I've kind of built up a layer of okay, I feel confident that I have a good central idea of what it is I'm doing and how to do it well, at which point I saw the whole world of development and thought, oh, wow, 90% of this seems really fraudy. And that gave me a whole new level of anxieties on what I was going to do next and how I was going to try not to fall into those traps. From your point of view, where can you pinpoint moments where you had that? So you said when you were first going into offices, first going into buildings, because of the environments, you felt it threw you into should I be here? When am I going to get found out? What were the learnings from there? Were there any experiences you can pinpoint where you thought that led me to this and that helped in the future?
Yeah, I think there are definitely those common themes that sort of sit in those situations. And I think about the fact that, well, first and foremost, the thing that you're told or you believe is that you come into the working world fully formed and fully kind of, this is it, you should know everything, you should be an expert. And I went into the world of consulting and startups, where you really are in an environment where you have to get stuff done, it's on a deadline, and ultimately you need to be an expert, and you need to be an expert in multiple things, right? So that is the space where you're going in and basically supporting businesses, advising businesses, and they need you to be an expert. They're expecting you to bring all this wealth of information and all of that good stuff. Well, if you're fresh out of university, or perhaps you haven't had particular training, that isn't necessarily going to be the case. But the thing is, everyone has the ability to become an expert or to learn and to grow. But I think what means that people feel like they are a fraud or an imposter is based around actually the core elements that we call out of what makes strong cultures. Because ultimately what's happening is the environments you're setting into, so the environments are set by a particular culture or a way of working, and there'll be things in place or not in place that make you feel a certain way. So to bring that to life for you a bit more, if I think about me stepping into a boardroom full of men and I'm the only woman and I'm there to present that. So first and foremost, I don't feel included in that space. I don't feel a sense of belonging because I may not see a version of myself there. So I feel like an imposter. The next thing around that is the fact that I am going into that space and I haven't necessarily been given the tools or support that I need to be able to give that presentation, to have the confidence, to feel empowered. So that's another part of that as well. I think also it depends on that environment, like whether you feel safe to speak up, whether you feel that you are trusted in an environment, whether you feel that you won't be humiliated if you say something that's not quite right. So that can be another element, that psychological safety that plays into that. And I think also if you're not recognized or given feedback on your work, so if I didn't know if I was doing things right or wrong for ages, that actually is just going to make that feeling even worse, like how you're feeling. So that lack of recognition in that as well. And then I think also what's really important is just thinking about, am I aligned with what this work is that we're doing? Like, does this align with my values? Do I feel aligned with the purpose of what I'm delivering here? Because if I don't, that's going to give me that's going to throw me off. I'm going to feel nervous around that because actually this isn't kind of my vibe. This isn't my thing. And I'm not aligned with the work that I'm doing, which might make me also feel somewhat fraudulent because it's not something I believe in as the core of what I want to be doing as well. So there's some really key factors there that I think play into what are the environments that people are stepping into and that I was stepping into, where I was like, I'm going to get found out because for all of these multitude of reasons that were causing me to feel that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, I mean, so powerful, the cultural element, the environment, what you're seeing and what you're expecting to go in there. I'm wondering, So part of my journey has been going from wearing very much a corporate work mask as much as I can. I mean, I can't help but pour out as Adam, sadly, but actually getting to a place where I'm confident to say, oh, actually, a lot of my success is down to my authentic self. And it sounds like, well, certainly some of the reasons I was wearing a work mask were the ones that you were just describing about the environment and not feeling like I fit in, and not seeing representations of my particular brand of hairiness in the room. Obviously, a lot less than a boardroom full of men. I've got one thing in common with them, definitely. But I was wondering, is that something that you felt you've had to do to kind of build that creditability piece, or how long has it taken you to become the authentic person that I feel I'm talking to today? I think
It's taken a long while actually, and I think it's only probably in the last couple of years, maybe 3 years, where I've really felt that I am being my true authentic self. And it's happened also in in places where I have had a really great leader or sort of manager who's enabled me and empowered me to be that version of myself and to really show up in that way. And that, I remember sort of when that happened, sort of at the beginning, when I probably was turning around 30, and I had this incredible manager, and he really kind of put all those things in place to make sure that I did feel safe to speak up, that, you know, I was included, that I was aligned with the purpose and direction of the work, and really sort of saw me for me and saw my abilities. But it's taken a lot of self-work as well, and recognition of who I am and what I need, and to set some very clear boundaries. And I think also just appreciating myself a lot more and spending the time on recognizing what I've achieved, but also just to kind of surround myself with a network of incredible women as well. Lauren Curry runs a course called Upfront, which is all about supporting women on that journey of confidence. And I did that course, and it was absolutely incredible because it really unlocked so much for me in terms of, actually, let's take a moment to focus on what I have achieved, what my ability is, and also the society that we're working in that is often pushing against that. And it really kind of was that light bulb moment where you go, you know what, it's time for me to really lean into who I am. And as scary as that can be, as soon as I did that, I was sort of recognizing, oh, this is meaning I am creating so much deeper connections with people. I'm enjoying myself so much more. And the most liberating feeling was to be my own sort of also vulnerable self, to be able to go, I don't know the answer to that actually. And almost like that sense of relief that you get from everyone around you, where they go, oh, I'm so glad she said it, because me neither. Like, can we just call it out? I don't know. And it got me reflecting that over the years in my career, those moments where I have done that and been my true authentic self are when I've created deeper connections. It's when I've had better conversations, and it's when I've had the most fun. And I was like, I don't want to spend any more time not doing that, because that's not what life's about. And we are human. And more than anything, we need connection right now. And so we need to be ourselves. And it's a really great feeling. It doesn't stop you feeling sometimes walking into a room going, oh, God, this is a bit scary. But it definitely removes that fraud, that imposter vibe, because you're like, this is me. I'm showing up as me.
Breach. I really feel a lot of what you're saying. It really connects, and I think you're absolutely right. That well, the big shift for me, and I know this is completely different. I do want to talk about how you took the step into creating what it is you're co-running now. So from my point of view, and it is still an ongoing journey of trying to be my authentic self and taking a step back every time I feel scared and then pushing forward again. One of the big light bulb moments for me was that I'm not going to be for every company, and that's okay. And I think that was the big thing for me, that if I come across a company or start working for people and it turns out that I'm the wrong fit, it doesn't mean that I'm the worst person in the world and I'm an absolute fraud and don't know anything. It means that I'm not the right fit and I need to find somewhere with, you talked about values earlier. I think that's something that's really new in my world, that I have to feel a connection to the values of the company and I have to reflect those values. Otherwise, it is going to be a weird fit, and I can probably do it for 6 months to a year, but I'll be miserable. And as you say, that fun word, I'm still getting used to the fact I come from a family of people that grew up telling me that work should be the worst thing in the world, or was for them, and they were miserable all the time because of it and would drink heavily and party to get over it just to go back and do it again. I'm still on that journey where I'm like, oh, it can be fun. You don't have to be embarrassed about the fact that you're loving work, and as you say, that's led to the best ideas I've had. I'm fascinated to know, so there's a couple of things. I'm fascinated to know how much of this experience you needed to have to put you in the right place to think, right, now's the time for the Future Kind Collective.
Yeah, I think it's actually, if I think about everything that I've experienced in my career, that has been so important. Every part of it really has led to the business that we now run actually existing, because without those experiences, you don't really sort of kind of validate your idea and what you want to provide for people. And I think I've been fortunate enough to work in lots of different environments, in startups, in large corporates, consulting in different parts of the world, which is amazing. And I think there has always been that common thread of how do we enable people to be their best selves, and if you like, their authentic selves in the work that they do. And like you say, sort of the traditional ways of thinking about work, and I had this same view as well, Adam. I was like, right, I have to be serious, I have to dress a certain way, I have to like present myself in a certain way, and I was very serious about business, you know, that kind of vibe. And I was like, oh, right, this is the only way you can do it. And that's what we'd all been taught. But it wasn't actually, that very rigid way of thinking about business is not inclusive and does not enable people to be their very best selves, because we all have different needs, different requirements. And so over time, what I kept observing in these different businesses, big or small, was this common need of, actually, people require a particular experience, a particular environment, a particular culture to be their very best in themselves. And it was the same across all businesses. And the businesses I worked with, some were doing a great job of it, some were working at it, and some it wasn't so great, right? Or they were on the journey. And so all of this was that common thread. But the thing that was always the case was working with individuals and going, are we getting the best out of them? Are they actually turning up and enjoying this? Because ultimately, I'm someone who does enjoy work, but I was thinking, if I'm going to spend 8 hours, a minimum sometimes of 8 hours a day doing this and working for someone else, like everyone else, this should be an enjoyable experience, because this percentage of our life is committed to this. And how do we make it enjoyable? And it was with that the Future Kind Collective came to be. And it was with that my co-founder Nat and I said, we can change the way work looks for people, and that actually we can make it a place where we create that sense of belonging, where people enjoy coming to work, they give their best, and everyone gets to work for kinder, fairer, better design companies. And so that has been the thread that has led to this. And that has been fed by all my experiences in work. And as I've met people and spoken to people, I think that's a shared experience. And why, when I do share with people the company I'm now running, they go, oh yeah, that's what we need in the world right now. And so that's a pretty good feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, going back to the reason that when I came across your company and yourselves, that I'm like, it's a moth to a flame at the moment. I just think it's more important than it's ever been. And seeing people have the word kind in there, I just think is such an important thing. And a lot of what you talk about is not feeling like you are invited into the world of work, that feeling like an outsider, in your case being a woman, in my case just being slightly weird, but yeah, actually feeling like you can create an environment where people feel and safe enough and cared for enough that they will bring everything that they've got, or a lot more, let's say, of what they've got to work. Because I know that I've had it in the past where I've worked places I absolutely hated the place, and I was lucky enough to have fun there because there were a good group of people that I got on with. But it was luck. It was absolute luck and the area. And as soon as one person left, you were back to hating the company and just all the things, presenteeism, doing the bare minimum, all of that stuff, waiting for lunchtime being the best part of the day, that type of thing. So it's amazing that you, well, I think also had the confidence to actually say, oh, we think this is needed in the world, and actually build a company around being able to help other companies get there.
Yeah. And I guess that's quite a journey to go from someone who was walking into companies or boardrooms and being like, oh, when am I going to get found out, to going, you know what, I'm going to do it myself, and I'm going to have the confidence to say, I want to do this better, I want to do it this way. And I think it takes a lot of there's a journey behind that. There's a lot of like self-work on that as well, but I think also surrounding yourself with those people who also share that that vision, but also who want you to succeed. I think, too often we can see environments or situations where, people aren't willing to put the ladder down. They're not willing to support because there's this fear of helping each other out, in case it means that, you lose your role to them in the future, or whatever that looks like, and this competition. And I think there is this need right now, and people want this shift where they go, let's help each other out. We're all sharing this world together. We can all make it a better place. And we don't need to be sort of those kind of power hungry people that we've seen in, as the kind of epitome of great leadership in the past, of like, doing, their own thing and all of this kind of stuff, and leaving people behind. And I think it's like, let's just lean into that a bit more. And it's, we're still on the journey. We're 2 years into running our business, and it's been great, but it's always a journey. And there are moments, and this can happen in a day, right, where you go, this is the best thing I've ever done, I love it so much, to the next minute being like, okay, I give up. Whose sofa am I going to crash on when this all falls apart? That sort of thing. It's a wild ride. And it's not to say that I don't have moments where I don't go, oh, when did I think that I could do this? But I think it's the fact that you just, again, it's coming back to those things that you learn, those reflections you have from previous situations, and you go, no, I can do this. I know I have the ability to do this, and if I can't, I'm going to learn. And I think that's the thing. It's just saying to yourself, I'm always learning, I'm always growing. I will mess it up, I will fail, but I will learn from it, and I'll try again. And I think it's important that you always have that vulnerability, which is why I think, with the sector you're in and learning and development, it's something that is just so critical, like so critical, particularly for businesses, because it signals, we're going to give you this opportunity in this space to learn, to develop and grow. We're not expecting you to come and be fully formed, but we can see that you have the abilities there and the opportunity is there, and we're going to support you on that. And it's so powerful. And I just wish more companies were doing more of it, and really leaning into it. So
that's I mean, thank you for saying that, because I do think, we're in the middle of a massive shift in the development area of how it is we turn up and support a company, and it's moving more and more towards that bigger piece of what do you want the culture of the company to be. So I do see like us being a big part of your world and the success around that. I did, to change that, well, to kind of go all the way back to the very beginning, one of the things that you said when you started was that you're not necessarily a fan of the definitions around imposter syndrome and fraud. Could you speak a bit more about what it is about them, or how they've been accepted into the mainstream that you don't agree with or you have trouble with?
Well, I think the word fraud is, it's such a weighted word. And if you think about it in the context of, well, you look at the dictionary definition, it's where someone is pretending and deceiving others for monetary gain, or for, it's all about deception, basically.
Yeah.
And I think from that perspective, certainly when you ask the question, are you a fraud?
Yeah.
I'm not doing any of that, that's for sure, just to clear that up. So it doesn't, but I think, it is weighted in something that is very, it's a troublesome terminology in that sense, right? Because I don't surround myself with people who are going out there intentionally to deceive people. But that is the word that we default to tell ourselves that we are not up to the job. We call ourselves a fraud because we feel we're deceiving people.
Yeah.
And that's such a weighted thing and cruel thing to be saying to yourself, in terms of, I'm deceiving people by showing up today, and I want to do it for some form of gain for myself. And the reality is that actually you are turning up and you're going to do the best you possibly can, but you, in your mind, you have a narrative that for whatever standard you may have set for yourselves, or more importantly, that the society or environment around you has set for you, you feel that you are coming in and you are being deceitful, and you are trying to pretend, and you are being paid to do this ultimately. So, there is a kind of an attachment there. So I just think that it's such a cruel internal narrative to have. And then I also think the same with imposter and imposter syndrome as well, because it's the fact that terminology is a default of going, oh, I've got a bit of imposter syndrome about this. Again, it's a very heavily weighted word. And essentially what we're saying is that our narrative is that we don't feel that we can show up in a space or should be showing up in that space. And I think that is the question there that I want to dive into. I always want to ask, why do you feel that you can't or shouldn't be turning up in this space? Because there are a whole lot of people who have been doing that, and I can assure you they are far less qualified than you are, and yet you are telling yourself that you're an imposter, you're a fraud. That person is not. And what is the different narrative, or what's the standard that's been set for you that has made you feel that way? And it's just but it's something that we throw around so much. And then I think because we all start to use that terminology, we then bring it in as part of our own narrative, rather than saying, I don't feel included in this space. I don't feel I belong in this space. I don't feel safe in this space, that I may be humiliated. They're the words that we should be digging into.
Yeah.
Because otherwise we have these big buckets of, I've got imposter syndrome, but what does that actually mean in the reality of the situation and what that looks like? And how can we respond to that and help someone not feel that way? So I just feel they're very punchy, potentially potent definitions that can create a very negative narrative that almost becomes the default as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's, it's what I would say is the major elephant in the room with me doing this podcast is that I have pretty much on every single level the completely unfair. The world has been built in this white, middle class, kind of educated, straight male. It's been made in my image to a huge extent. So, and I feel it. And I still feel like a fraud. It's the whole reason I'm doing this. But I don't have any of the whole patriarchal world is built to make women feel like they are unsafe or unwanted in like the majority of society still in 2023. So I can't even begin to pretend I understand how much more difficult or how much how much you're kind of built to have this hateful talk towards yourself, because it's everything you see and everything you've been told in one way or another leading up to that point. I don't really even have a question at the end of this. It's more a case of just congratulations to anybody that's found a way to actually do the work and give themselves enough genuine, like, mirror holding, you're doing well, and building a support network around them so that they can have those days where they feel like, no, I'm crashing and burning in each and every way in your head, but having enough people and enough self-worth around you to be able to get past that. So I can't, as I say, I just find it really impressive for anybody that manages to do that, because I struggle, and I've got aces in my cards. Like, there should be no reason that somebody like me struggles here. I do. So taking it to the next level, and all of the levels where you are not the dominant form of person in that business or that area. I just think, A, it's so important, B, it's so incredible that anybody's managed to get there. So on behalf of all women, well done.
I think it's also, I think, it's totally that. And I also think, like, how the question is, those who haven't had to question that or think about that, how are they then creating the environment and using their platform to ensure there is that environment to feel that people, or to squash that self-narrative and to push against that, and to help from and support from that perspective. Because that's where we need to go to now, right? That's what we need to be doing to create those inclusive spaces, and those spaces where everyone can succeed and do their very best. And there is a responsibility there to do that. I think it's an interesting one, again, of like, the empathy is required there, right? Because if you haven't had that experience or that lived experience, learn it, understand it, ask the questions, and say, what is my role in this? So that you can come into this room, you can feel that you are an expert or you have a voice. Like, how can you make sure that those questions are being asked to enable that? And I think even more so now that we're in a remote culture, we don't necessarily have as much of that connection anymore. So a lot of us are spending that time isolated and independent from people. So it's like, how do we make sure that we're creating the platforms, the spaces where we have got that that support, that connection, that is actually meaning that people aren't sat at home on their own thinking, I'm not up to this, I don't have anyone to speak to about this, or you don't have someone in the room with you to recognize, hey, that person's experiencing kind of self-doubt here or lack of confidence. I think that's the next stage in this. Like, how do we do that in a remote world and create that support and connection? I think that's something that we're seeing a lot in organizations. We've got work to do now to make sure that we are thinking beyond what's in front of us on our screen, and how we're creating those spaces for people.
That's it's really enlightening, and it's genuinely, like, whenever I talk to people such as yourself that have this view of how to make places, well, just more inclusive and more comfortable, that I always get like this burst of positivity about the future. But on the flip side of that, then I'll see, I mean, recently some Australian millionaire saying that, we should have more unemployment because people don't know how good they've got it. And I get the flip side of that, where I'm like, that it feels like, I don't know, it feels like there's a stretching apart of what I think is the sensible way, which is what we are talking about. If we all feel cared about, then we're going to do better work. If we all feel included, then we're going to come up with more ideas. The dictionary definition of why we want people to be comfortable versus it's all about, getting the most profit possible, and actually anybody that isn't owning a company is expendable. Do you feel, I mean, it sounds like you feel positive about the future. Are there any fears in that realm, or do you think we're fighting a good fight?
It's a very good question. It comes in waves, right? I think I think there's a long way to go. I think that there are some really positive moves happening in terms of, the people I get to speak to around the future of work and the organizations I work with who really want to make a difference. And they are guided by a very strong sense of purpose. And I don't use the word purpose flippantly. I mean it in a way that is actually like, how are we making a difference in our world for people, planet, and society? That's, and I feel very fortunate that that is a lot of my day-to-day interactions. On the flip side of that, there are lots of other external influencing factors that feel quite scary. And I think that it's the world is changing on a day-to-day basis, and it's full of unpredictability. However, I feel like there is a shift happening in people acknowledging what needs to change, specifically right now in the workplace as well, because that's closest to what I work in and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So can only speak from sort of those observations. And I think the dialogue is changing. I think we recognize we can't work in the way that we have done in the past.
Yeah.
People want something far more from their work, from their lives. And the working world and companies are going to have to respond to that. Those companies that are going to thrive and survive are those that are going to be more purpose focused, where they are going to think more about how they engage with their people and how they are more people focused. That's really positive to hear. It's a journey, and it's going to take time with any of this kind of good stuff. So I feel very positive about that. I think that we're also starting to see really tangible benefits of that, because I'm not naive. I work in an industry where if I talk about purpose and culture, some people glaze over because it sounds a bit fluffy, right? And we're starting to see actually there are really tangible differences for those companies who do focus on that space versus those that don't. So that's great, not only for me, running a business in this space, but also it's really important. And, we've got generations of people coming through now who will demand that from their workplace. So that's really positive. And so I do like to focus in that space to remain positive that things will change and shift. But we have to keep talking about it. We can't, the work is only getting started. So yes, I feel positive. And every time I get to speak to people or expand my network in this space, or speak to people like yourself who align with this thinking, I feel super great and positive about it. And I'm excited about the work I do every day. But it's ongoing work, and it's a commitment to that to keep it going. So yeah, I think it's great to see these shifts happening. And I hope that these shifts also, these changes in how we design cultures, will mean there is a shift in how people feel about themselves and how they feel about showing up at work and being able to be their true selves and to be the best that they possibly can be in those spaces as well. Amazing.
One final question before we wrap up today. I think you've hit on so much. This is the question of basically giving you a chance to summarize all of the great stuff you've said over the last 40 odd minutes. So apologies for the impossible question I'm just about to ask you, but let's see how we go. If you can throw yourself back to walking into that boardroom, faced with this whole host of every kind of possible thing to make you feel as fraudulent as you possibly could, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give to yourself back then to help get through it potentially quicker than you did at the time?
Oh, what a question. I think for me is let me think. Now I'm going to pause before I jump into this, because that's a great question. I think for me, it's what I wish I'd been equipped with, if you like, coming into that room, or just had front of mind for me, is just the knowledge and understanding and somewhere noted of my achievements, acknowledging that and having that captured somewhere, just knowing that to bring into a room. I think also the fact that, you know, we are all human, we turn up in these spaces and we are bringing everything into those rooms as well, whether it's the fact that, whether it's our background, whether it's our experiences, but also there are things like we are humans, we have family situations, we have things outside of work that mean that we are showing up in that room that connects us. Actually, that is a connecting thing, that when we feel quite distant from those people, or we don't feel we have that shared common experience, we're humans, and ultimately we're here to connect, and we are here to learn and grow together. And I think also it's just the fact that every one of those situations I walked into, I was learning from, and I learned so much, and it has enabled me to be where I am today. There are some funny stories in it that I can laugh at on reflection. It taught me how to do things better, and it taught me more and more that being myself is the most valuable thing. And through that, I would have better conversations, better connections, and that is what it should be about.
Amazing. Alicia, thank you so much for your time today. It's been an incredible conversation. And good luck with the ongoing battle for better culture.
Thank you so much, Adam. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you once again to Alicia for spending time with us and talking to us about feeling less than and how she got past it. I think, as I said at the opening of this, there was so much great self-reflection in here, and I can't help but feel like it will have chimed with a lot of people. I think one of the major things that when I've come to do this podcast, I feel like a fraud despite the fact that I have so much going for me, in that I genuinely can't think of many instances in my entire life when I've walked into a room and felt like there were no other people that looked like me in that room. And that's despite covering myself in ridiculous tattoos and spending most of my life having ridiculous haircuts. So the idea that I can feel like a fraud despite that, I can't even begin to imagine how much easier it is to start believing and put this negative talk when you walk into rooms where you don't see any representation of yourself in there. And I think Alicia's story really highlights that in a lot of ways, especially in the environments that she was working in, and hopefully are getting better now. But also, more importantly, her way of getting through that, I think, is really inspirational. So thank you once again for sharing with us, and we hope to speak to you again soon. Thank you for watching and listening. We really appreciate that. And if you think that this could help others, then please do share it in any way that you can. Also, this should be the worst me that you see hosting this, because you're going to give me feedback that makes me better. So if there's anything that you either liked or disliked, want to see more of, want to see less of, then please let me know by leaving feedback. It's going to be really beneficial to making me better as this goes along, and hopefully catching up with my amazing guests. Other than that, thank you and see you next time.